What if I told you that the biggest threat to your intelligence isn't lack of education, poverty, or even ignorance, but something far more sinister that's hiding in plain sight? What if the very thing that's supposed to make us smarter is actually making us dumber, and we're too caught up in the illusion to notice? Here's a fact that'll shake you to your core. We're living through the golden age of stupidity, and it's not happening by accident. You see, there's this brilliant German theologian named Dietrich Bonhoeffer who figured out something absolutely terrifying about human nature over 80 years ago. Something that explains why smart people make stupid decisions, why educated societies collapse into chaos, and why your perfectly intelligent friends suddenly sound like they've lobotomized themselves whenever certain topics come up. His insights are so relevant to what's happening right now that it's almost scary. But here's the kicker. This isn't about other people being stupid. This is about you, me, and everyone we know being systematically programmed to surrender our ability to think independently. We're all walking around thinking we're immune to this while participating in it every single day. The scary part? Most of us don't even realize we've already been infected. I'm about to show you exactly how modern society has weaponized our basic human need for belonging against our capacity for independent thought, why the smartest people often fall the hardest for collective stupidity, and most importantly, how to build immunity against this social disease before it completely rewires your brain. But I've got to warn you, once you see this pattern, you can't unsee it, and it's going to change how you look at everything from social media to politics to your own friend group. Stick with me until the end because I'm going to give you a practical roadmap for breaking free from the herd without losing your sanity or your relationships. Trust me, you're going to need this information more than you realize. You know what's absolutely mind-blowing? We're living in the most connected, information-rich era in human history, yet somehow we seem to be getting dumber by the day. I mean, think about it. You've got the entire library of human knowledge sitting right there in your pocket, but instead of becoming wiser, we're drowning in a sea of stupidity. It's like having access to every recipe ever created but still burning water. The paradox isn't just ironic, it's downright terrifying when you really dig into what's happening beneath the surface of our modern society. Here's the thing that'll knock your socks off. Information and wisdom aren't even distant cousins, let alone the same thing. Information is just raw data, facts, figures, news headlines, social media posts, all that noise that bombards your brain 24/7. But wisdom? That's the ability to filter through all that chaos, connect the dots, and actually understand what it all means for your life. It's like the difference between owning a toolbox full of hammers and actually knowing how to build a house. We've become information hoarders but wisdom beggars, and that's exactly where Bonhoeffer's theory starts to make terrifying sense. The cruel irony is that this information overload is actually making us more susceptible to stupidity, not less. When you're constantly ping-ponging between TikTok videos, breaking news alerts, and whatever controversy is trending today, your brain doesn't have time to process anything deeply. You start operating on autopilot, reacting instead of thinking, following instead of leading your own thoughts. It's like trying to have a meaningful conversation at a rock concert. The noise drowns out any chance of real understanding, and before you know it, you're just nodding along to whatever seems loudest. What's even scarier is how this creates perfect conditions for what Bonhoeffer identified as collective stupidity to flourish. When everyone's overwhelmed by information but starved for wisdom, we start looking for shortcuts, and those shortcuts usually involve letting someone else do the thinking for us. We gravitate toward echo chambers, influencers, and tribal thinking because it's easier than wrestling with complexity. And that's when individual intelligence starts dying a slow, painful death, replaced by the comfort of groupthink and the illusion that being informed is the same as being wise. But here's where things get really interesting, and you're going to want to pay attention to this next part. Now, here's where Dietrich Bonhoeffer blew my mind, and it's probably going to blow yours too. This brilliant German theologian didn't define stupidity the way most people think about it. He wasn't talking about low IQ or lack of education, hell no. According to Bonhoeffer, stupidity isn't about being intellectually challenged, it's about surrendering your ability to think independently. It's when perfectly intelligent people choose to let others do their thinking for them. Imagine having a Ferrari in your garage but deciding to walk everywhere because someone told you cars are dangerous. That's the kind of stupidity Bonhoeffer was talking about, and it's absolutely everywhere in modern society. What makes this definition so revolutionary is that it flips everything we thought we knew about intelligence on its head. You can have a PhD from Harvard, memorize encyclopedias, and still be stupid in Bonhoeffer's terms if you're just parroting what your social circle believes without questioning it. It's not about what you know, it's about whether you're actually using your brain to think through what you know. Think about those people who can quote statistics all day long but can't think critically about where those statistics come from or what they actually mean. They've got all the information but none of the wisdom to process it independently. Bonhoeffer observed this phenomenon while watching ordinary Germans get swept up in Nazi ideology, and that's what makes his insights so chilling and relevant today. These weren't uneducated peasants. Many were doctors, lawyers, teachers, intellectuals. But they'd given up their individual thinking in favor of collective certainty. They'd traded the hard work of forming their own opinions for the comfort of belonging to something bigger than themselves. Sound familiar? It should, because we're seeing the exact same pattern play out across social media, politics, and pretty much every corner of modern life where people choose tribal loyalty over independent thought. The scariest part about this kind of stupidity is that it's contagious as hell. When you're surrounded by people who've stopped thinking for themselves, it becomes incredibly tempting to join the club. After all, why struggle with complex questions when you can just adopt the group's answers? Why face the loneliness of independent thought when you can bask in the warm glow of collective agreement? But here's what Bonhoeffer understood that most people miss. Once you surrender your thinking to the group, you don't just lose your intelligence, you lose your humanity. And that's when things start getting really dangerous, which brings us to something even more unsettling. Here's what's going to mess with your head. Stupidity isn't really an individual problem. It's a social disease that spreads faster than gossip at a high school reunion. Bonhoeffer figured out that stupidity is fundamentally about relationships, not brainpower. It's what happens when people stop thinking as individuals and start thinking as a mob. You've probably seen this in action without even realizing it. Ever notice how the same person who's sharp as a tack in one-on-one conversations suddenly becomes a mindless zombie when they're part of a group? That's not coincidence. That's the social nature of stupidity doing its dirty work. The genius of Bonhoeffer's insight is that he recognized stupidity as a defense mechanism against social isolation. Think about it. When you're part of a group, questioning the group's beliefs doesn't just make you wrong, it makes you an outsider. And humans are wired to avoid social rejection like the plague. So what do? We turn off our critical thinking and turn on our conformity mode. It's easier to be stupid together than smart alone. We'd rather be wrong with the crowd than right by ourselves, because at least when we're wrong together, we've got company in our misery. What makes this particularly insidious in modern society is how social media has turbocharged this whole process. Now you don't just have to conform to your immediate social circle, you've got to navigate the expectations of hundreds or thousands of online connections. Every post becomes a test of tribal loyalty. Every opinion you share gets filtered through the question, will this make me popular or will it make me a pariah? Before you know it, you're not expressing what you actually think, you're performing what you think others want to hear. And that performance becomes so automatic that you forget what your real thoughts even were. The really twisted part is that this social stupidity feels incredibly empowering to the people caught up in it. When you're part of the mob, you feel strong, righteous, connected. You've got instant validation for every thought and instant enemies to rally against. It's like being part of a sports team where winning is more important than playing fair. But here's what Bonhoeffer understood. That feeling of power is completely fake. You're not actually strong, you're just part of something that feels strong. And when that something starts making decisions for you, you realize you've traded your individual power for the illusion of collective strength. Which leads us to the question of how modern technology has made this ancient problem infinitely worse. Buckle up, because we're about to dive into the ways modern society has created the perfect storm for collective stupidity to absolutely thrive. Social media isn't just changing how we communicate, it's rewiring our brains to crave validation over truth, comfort over challenge, and belonging over independent thinking. Every platform is essentially a massive experiment in behavioral conditioning. And guess what? We're the lab rats. The algorithm doesn't care about making you smarter. It cares about keeping you engaged, which usually means feeding you more of what you already believe while making you angrier about what you don't. Political polarization has turned what used to be disagreements into holy wars where the other side isn't just wrong, they're evil incarnate. We've created these hermetically sealed ideological bubbles where questioning your side's orthodoxy is tantamount to treason. It's not enough to have conservative or liberal opinions anymore. You've got to have the right conservative or liberal opinions, in exactly the right proportions, expressed in exactly the right way. Deviate from the script even slightly, and watch how quickly your own tribe turns on you. This isn't political discourse. It's intellectual terrorism designed to keep everyone in line through fear of social excommunication. Cancel culture has become the enforcement mechanism for this new social stupidity, and it's absolutely brilliant in its effectiveness. The threat of being cancelled, losing your job, your friends, your reputation, creates such powerful incentives for conformity that most people don't even risk thinking forbidden thoughts, let alone expressing them. It's like having thought police that don't need to actually exist because the fear of them is enough to make people police themselves. And here's the kicker. The people enforcing these unwritten rules often don't even realize they're doing it. They genuinely believe they're fighting for justice while actually serving as foot soldiers in the war against independent thought. The mainstream media has become less about informing and more about confirming existing biases, turning news consumption into emotional masturbation rather than intellectual nourishment. Every story is filtered through partisan lenses, every fact is weaponized for ideological warfare, and every narrative is designed to make you feel something rather than think something. We're not getting news, we're getting carefully crafted emotional manipulation disguised as information. And the more emotionally invested we become in these narratives, the harder it becomes to step back and think critically about what's actually happening. But here's what most people don't realize about why this manipulation works so well. Let me tell you something that's gonna sting a little. Most people don't want to think for themselves. I know. Everybody claims they're independent thinkers, rebels who march to the beat of their own drum. But when push comes to shove, the vast majority of people would rather outsource their thinking to someone else than deal with the exhausting, lonely, terrifying work of forming their own opinions. Thinking independently isn't just hard work, it's scary as hell because it means taking full responsibility for your beliefs and their consequences. It's so much easier to let the group do the heavy lifting while you just go along for the ride. Conformity offers something that independent thinking never can: certainty without effort. When you adopt the group's beliefs, you don't have to wrestle with doubt, complexity, or nuance. You get instant answers to life's hardest questions, and those answers come pre-validated by everyone around you. It's like having a GPS for your worldview. You don't need to know where you're going or how to get there, you just need to follow the directions. And if you end up in the wrong place, well, at least you've got company, and you can all be wrong together while blaming the GPS. The social rewards for conformity are immediate and powerful, while the rewards for independent thinking are delayed and often invisible. Agree with the group, and you get likes, shares, approval, inclusion, that warm fuzzy feeling of belonging. Think for yourself, and you get, what? Uncertainty, criticism, isolation, the constant anxiety of not knowing if you're right. From a purely psychological standpoint, conformity is a much better deal in the short term. It's only in the long term that you realize you've traded your intellectual soul for social acceptance, and by then, the habit of not thinking is so ingrained that breaking free feels impossible. What makes this particularly tragic is that most people don't even realize they've made this trade-off. They genuinely believe they've arrived at their opinions through careful consideration, when really they've just absorbed them from their environment like a sponge soaks up water. They mistake exposure for education, repetition for truth, and social validation for intellectual confirmation. It's like thinking you're a great cook because you can perfectly reheat someone else's leftovers. You're executing the process flawlessly, but you're not actually creating anything original. And this brings us to the crucial question: how do you break free from a system designed to keep you trapped? Alright, here's where the rubber meets the road. How do you actually escape the gravitational pull of collective stupidity when everything around you is designed to keep you trapped in orbit? First thing you've got to understand is that breaking free isn't a one-time decision. It's a daily practice that requires more mental discipline than most people are willing to invest. It's like trying to stay in shape. You can't just work out once and call it good. You've got to consistently choose the harder path of independent thinking over the easier path of groupthink, even when it makes you uncomfortable, unpopular, or uncertain about what you believe. Start by questioning everything, especially the beliefs you hold most dear. The ideas that feel most obviously true to you are often the ones that most need examining, because they're usually the ones you've never actually thought through. You've just inherited them from your culture, family, or social circle. Ask yourself, where did this belief come from? What evidence supports it? What evidence contradicts it? Who benefits if I believe this? What would I lose if I stopped believing it? These aren't comfortable questions, but comfort is the enemy of growth, and growth is the enemy of stupidity. Diversify your information diet like your financial portfolio depends on it, because in a way, your intellectual wealth does depend on it. Stop consuming content that only confirms what you already believe. Actively seek out smart people who disagree with you, not to argue with them, but to understand their perspective. Read books by authors whose politics you hate. Listen to podcasts that challenge your assumptions. Follow people on social media who make you slightly uncomfortable with their ideas. It's like cross-training for your brain. You're not trying to become them, but you're strengthening intellectual muscles you didn't even know you had. Develop what I call intellectual courage, the willingness to be wrong, to change your mind, to admit when you don't know something, and to stand alone when necessary. This might be the hardest part because it goes against every social instinct we have. But here's the thing. Intellectual courage is like a muscle that gets stronger with use. Every time you choose truth over comfort, evidence over emotion, independent thought over social approval, you're building the strength to resist collective stupidity. And once you start tasting the freedom that comes with thinking for yourself, You'll wonder how you ever lived any other way. But fair warning, this freedom comes with a price that most people aren't prepared to pay. Here's the brutal truth nobody wants to talk about. Thinking for yourself is expensive, and the currency is relationships, comfort, and social acceptance. When you start questioning the sacred beliefs of your tribe, don't expect them to throw you a party. Expect pushback, confusion, disappointment, and sometimes outright hostility from people who used to consider you one of them. It's like being the first person to suggest that maybe the emperor isn't wearing any clothes. You might be right, but you're definitely going to be unpopular. The people around you have invested too much in the collective delusion to appreciate your inconvenient truth-telling. You'll lose friends, not because you're being mean or aggressive, but because independent thinking is threatening to people who've outsourced their thinking to the group. Your very existence as someone who thinks differently challenges their choice to conform, and that makes them deeply uncomfortable. It's easier for them to write you off as crazy, stubborn, or misguided than to examine why your questions make them so defensive. Some relationships will survive this transition, but many won't, and that's a price you've got to be willing to pay if you want intellectual freedom. The psychological cost is just as real as the social cost. When you stop relying on group certainty, you have to learn to live with ambiguity, complexity, and the constant possibility that you might be wrong about important things. That's terrifying for most people because humans crave certainty like plants crave sunlight. You'll find yourself saying "I don't know" a lot more often, and feeling genuinely uncertain about issues that everyone else seems to have figured out. This uncertainty isn't weakness, it's intellectual honesty. But it sure doesn't feel good when you're surrounded by people who seem so confident in their convictions. Professional consequences are real too, especially in environments where ideological conformity is expected or rewarded. Speaking up against prevailing wisdom can cost you promotions, opportunities, or even your job in some cases. The pressure to keep your mouth shut and go along to get along is enormous, and sometimes the practical reality is that you can't afford to be a martyr for intellectual honesty. But here's what I've learned. The cost of conformity is always higher in the long run than the cost of independence, even if it doesn't feel that way in the moment. Which brings us to the question of how to build the resilience you'll need to weather these storms. Building resistance to social pressure is like developing immunity to a virus. You need controlled exposure to build up your defenses gradually. Start small by expressing minor disagreements in low-stakes situations. Maybe it's questioning a movie review everyone loves, or offering a different perspective on a local issue. The goal isn't to be contrarian for the sake of being difficult, it's to practice the muscle memory of independent thought in situations where the consequences are manageable. Each time you successfully navigate a small disagreement without catastrophe, you build confidence for bigger challenges down the road. Develop what I call your intellectual anchor, a core set of principles and values that you've thought through carefully and won't compromise on, regardless of social pressure. These aren't just opinions you picked up somewhere. They're beliefs you've stress-tested through experience, evidence, and honest reflection. When the winds of social pressure start blowing, your anchor keeps you from drifting with the current. Maybe it's a commitment to truth over comfort, or individual responsibility over collective blame, or evidence over emotion. Whatever it is, make sure it's truly yours and not just something you inherited from someone else. Surround yourself with at least a few people who value intellectual honesty over social harmony. You don't need a huge network, but you need someone in your corner who'll call you out when you're being intellectually lazy and support you when you're being intellectually brave. These relationships are rare and precious because most people prioritize being liked over being honest. But when you find someone who's willing to disagree with you respectfully and engage with your ideas seriously, hold on to them tight. They're your insurance policy against the isolation that comes with independent thinking. Practice mental resilience by regularly engaging with ideas that make you uncomfortable, uncertain, or defensive. Read books that challenge your worldview. Have conversations with people who see the world differently. Expose yourself to evidence that contradicts your beliefs. Think of it as intellectual cross-training. You're not trying to become someone else, but you're building the mental flexibility to handle complexity and contradiction without breaking. The stronger your intellectual resilience, the less you'll need external validation for your thoughts and beliefs. And when you stop needing everyone else's approval for your ideas, that's when you finally become truly free to think for yourself. But remember, with this freedom comes a responsibility that extends far beyond your own mind. So here we are at the crossroads. You now know what Bonhoeffer knew, what most people will never understand, and what could either set you free or drive you crazy depending on what you do with this knowledge. You've seen how collective stupidity operates, how it spreads, and how it's designed to keep you trapped in a comfortable prison of groupthink. The question isn't whether this affects you, it does. The question is, what are you going to do about it? This isn't just philosophical theory we're playing with here. This is your life, your relationships, your future, and your freedom to think for yourself hanging in the balance. Every day you delay developing intellectual courage is another day you're letting someone else control your mind. Every time you choose comfort over truth, conformity over independence, you're participating in your own intellectual enslavement. But here's the beautiful part. Now that you know how the game works, you can choose to stop playing by their rules. I want you to start with one simple challenge. For the next week, question one belief you hold dear every single day. Not to destroy it, but to understand it. Where did it come from? What evidence supports it? Who benefits if you believe it? You might be shocked at what you discover about your own thought processes. This isn't about becoming cynical or contrarian, it's about becoming genuinely free. But here's the thing. This kind of content, these kinds of conversations, they don't happen by accident. They happen because people like you decide that intellectual freedom is worth fighting for. If this video opened your eyes even a little bit, if it made you question something you thought you knew for sure, then we need to keep this conversation going. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell because we're just getting started on this journey toward intellectual liberation. Give this video a thumbs up if you're ready to stop being a passenger in your own mind and start driving your own thoughts. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Someone who's smart enough to handle the truth and brave enough to act on it. Because the more people who wake up to how collective stupidity operates, the harder it becomes for those who profit from our intellectual complacency to keep us trapped. The choice is yours. Stay comfortable in the herd, or step into the uncomfortable freedom of independent thought. Choose wisely, your mind depends on it.